driving around, I do pick up from this area quite a bit.
Hey, this is Ren Smith. Jace Esterline is Lyft's top-ranked driver in Wilmington, North Carolina. Out on the north side with producer Alea McConnell, Jace is starting to notice how critical it is to show up.
I notice it more. And a lot of them are medical-based, kids that are going to and from school events, sporting events. I also get a lot of folks that are just trying to get to and from work. You know, that's a big bulk of it.
Yeah.
A lot of folks going to and from work around here.
Anna Casey is a data scientist at Cape Fear Collective, one of our partners in the Coastal Journalism Hub. It's a collaborative focused on health and well-being in New Hanover County. Anna's the one who walked us through rideshare data for our last story. Before that, Anna was looking at something more alarming.
Yeah, it was Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the National Association for Public Health Statistics and Information Systems. And it was done for the period 2010 to 2015. But we also looked at several other indicators around life expectancy as part of this data story. But what we found is New Hanover County has, on aggregate, the county has a pretty good life expectancy. I think it's one of the best in the state. I think I want to say 11th highest out of 100 counties. But when you start breaking it down by neighborhood or looking at racial disaggregations, you start to see there are these huge disparities. And in particular, there is a 17-and-a-half-year gap between two neighborhoods within New Hanover County.
17 and a half years.
So we see a pretty diverse patient population.
That's Dr. Galliano, Chief Medical Officer, describing who walks through the doors of the North Side's closest clinic.
The patient population that we serve is about 30% African American, 30% Hispanic Latino, and then 30% not that. There's a refugee population as well that's across those three groups from all over the world. And there's definitely some of the patient population that is historically from the community.
Helping those patients goes beyond the pharmaceutical.
There's a pretty large body of research that shows that at least 90% of health outcomes are determined outside of what happens in clinic walls. So we try very much to understand the milieu in which patients live and have to navigate to be able to attain their best health.
In terms of those factors, transportation, it's one of them. So we asked Anna to look at charts provided by Lyft, showing how rideshare gets used in the North Side's low life expectancy communities.
In the low life expectancy neighborhoods, is they are using this as transportation infrastructure. They're using it to get to school, to the grocery store, to food, to their jobs, to work. And then when you look at these high life expectancy neighborhoods, they're using it to get to the airport.
In one community, rideshare, it's doing a job you'd expect a bus to do. And I got curious about that, and so did we.
Well, one of my first questions is, where are all the bus stops? And we do have that data, but that's definitely something I want to look into, is how far are these low life expectancy neighborhoods from the nearest bus stop? And even if they are near a bus stop, what do the bus schedules look like for them, right? Because that's part of speaking to the transportation infrastructure piece.
So we started to dig into that. And what we found is in those communities, what planners call transportation disadvantages are there, but they aren't limited to the buses. We thought it deserved a series. A look at the role these transportation disadvantages play in the lives of community members, particularly the vulnerable ones, like that North Side immigrant population. Welcome to Shoresides, where we tell stories about coastal North Carolina. So, full disclosure, I don't own a car. That means I've always depended on walking, biking, public transportation, and other people for rides, including rideshare drivers. I've only owned a car once, a junker I used almost exclusively to get back and forth to the grocery store. Sometimes I feel like it all just kind of happened. Other times it feels like a decision. I think back to when I was a college student and I met this prominent and admittedly wealthy environmental activist. He argued convincingly that owning a car was crazy in a world with so many automobiles driving around with so many empty seats. If you needed a ride, you could just ask. But some people don't have that choice.
This is Vanessa Gonzalez. I'm an immigration attorney and owner of the law office of Vanessa Gonzalez. Pronouns are she, her. I've been doing this work now for about 15 years, and it does feel a little planes, trains, automobiles sometimes.
Mostly automobiles, specifically a Prius.
It's a newer model now, but not new. It's actually funny. I'm on my third Prius, and my prior Prius was 11-ish years old, and I joked that I would drive it till the wheels fell off because it was paid off. But in fact, after a day of back-to-back green card interviews, I made it about 2 blocks away from my house at a stoplight. It wasn't the wheels that fell off, but it was my brakes that went out. Thankfully, for the last good little bit of stretch, I'm traveling from Midtown Wilmington to downtown off of 4th Street, where my office is on most days, but I have been traveling quite a bit more post-election between here in Wilmington, where I live and the most of my clients live, to Durham off the Miami Boulevard exit, where they call it the Raleigh field office, which drives me nuts because it is in Durham and that can be confusing, where my clients' green card and naturalization adjudications happen.
Durham is about 130 miles each way.
Thankfully, not so much anymore to Charlotte, where the Executive Office of Immigration Review for our immigration courts, because there have been some post-COVID changes that allow WebEx.
WebEx is the Cisco video platform courts use for remote hearings.
However, that's judge specific and not always allowed for individual hearings.
It's a good option, but tech, of course, doesn't always work.
I heard an anecdote just this week that someone's WebEx cut out and they got a removal order, even though they were trying to call the court, trying to enter back into the WebEx link, and it wasn't working.
We reached out to Cisco about how they navigate that, but haven't heard back. Otherwise, the government, it's asking people to show up more, not less.
Currently, just about every case type is having an interview, regardless of age, regardless of category. We're seeing a lot of duplicative needs for travel for the clients, right? We've had multiple clients be issued fingerprint appointment notices various times for the same case.
Even when it's all going well, a single case isn't a single trip.
You go in for a first interview, they call you back for a follow-up interview, and then years later, another interview for the removal of conditions, another interview for the citizenship. You come back after the citizenship interview for the oath. So a lot of visits. And that's just on the affirmative side, right? Hearings for people that are in removal proceedings, which is what they call deportation now. Those are the type of cases that go before the court. And those can have multiple hearings, from your first calendar hearing to check-ins and then a final individual hearing. And I've had cases like that have carried on for the better part of 5 or 6 years before.
Which raises an obvious question. How do her clients get there? Sometimes the answer is her.
So I try to get around being the transportation and the representation for ethical and liability reasons, but it definitely happens because that's real life, right? I can think of times where, I was in a district court in a random rural county trying to help someone with a custody matter relating to their minor child in removal proceedings, and the other child school calls and there's an emergency and one parent has to go and the other parent can't leave because it's court, and I'm not leaving anybody stranded,
So when people ask her how to help, she has a very specific answer.
I think that's an area that I bring up frequently when I do community conversations and know your rights presentations, where people that are citizens or well-meaning with privilege ask, oh, this is overwhelming, how can we help? And, aside from being involved in sort of like community assistance and mutual aid, that is another way that people can assist is reasonable transportation for folks that have appointments or hearing dates or things like that.
Rides from lawyers and well-meaning community members are one answer, but what if there's another?
Yeah, so my name is Kevin Chen. I'm a senior analyst over here with the Union of Concerned Scientists. I work on our clean transportation team. I'm really excited to be here and really excited to talk about intercity buses. In transportation world, we might use the word intercity, but for most people, these buses, what we're talking about, it's Greyhound, it's Megabus, it's Flixbus, and there's a couple of other of these kinds of companies out there. They're buses that get you from city to city.
Chinatown bus lines has shown it could work. Curbside pickup, cheap seats, city to city up the East Coast.
Megabus, Flixbus, these low-cost buses really changed the game in the inner city world. And their big sell was they could advertise really low fares. I remember when they first came out, it was like penny or $1 fares from New York to DC or like something like that. They quickly expanded to being a really affordable and beloved kind of bus service across the country. The places where these buses stop on their way between these big cities or big routes, those can oftentimes be smaller towns, more rural areas, places where it's incredibly important that these people have ways to get around, especially with a dearth of urban transit services.
That was the good stretch. Kevin wrote an article about what came after.
That takes us kind of to the point we are recently in inner city bus history. That article that you saw was reporting on some of Megabus's struggles. I think as recent as 2020, Megabus filed for a version of bankruptcy. Megabus is still around, but that means they rearranged some of the ways that it operates, and they notably discontinued a bunch of routes, for instance, in the South. As a result, in around 2023, there was a bunch of downsizing of many of the inner city bus services. So there's a good amount of public backing. But in the end, a lot of the times, these are private companies, Megabus, for instance. And as a result, they really face a lot of fluctuation due to the pandemic.
But the story didn't end where his article did. Since he wrote it, things have changed once again.
Since then, I think, since the article that you saw, some of these trends have been reversed. We do need intercity bus services to resurge. And it's important to note that intercity bus services are one of the lowest emitting forms of intercity travel, emitting half as much as air travel or 3 times less as driving a personal vehicle.
We asked Kevin to look at North Carolina.
North Carolina has been part of a fingers crossed story of investment and resurgence of these intercity bus routes. What they do is they help subsidize Greyhound and another company, Sun Charter, to run a bunch of routes that stop in a bunch of intermediate cities as well. North Carolina's Department of Transportation expanded the number of round trips in the system by a third, from 9 trips to 12 trips since 2021. In addition, there are 2 new federally subsidized routes that are part of that mix. There's a huge increase in service by 50%, as well as ridership increases by over 37%. There's investment of $10 million a year. And all of that is to say that the state has been starting to recognize that the importance of these routes to connect people across the state.
We're still checking what that means for Wilmington. But next episode, could microtransit be the answer?
So my name is Brianna Dietrich. I'm the Public Relations Manager at Wave Transit, also known as the Cape Fear Public Transportation Authority. Micro is a point-to-point service. It's a form of microtransit. So it's if the city bus and a ride share, like a micromobility option like Uber or Lyft, had a baby. It's a combination of both, but it is run by your local transit system, in this case us. We have consistently stayed above 3,000 riders over the last year or more. And then to compare May of this year to May of last year, it's an increase of 125.6%. of trips. It's our most successful program at this time.
This is Shoresides. Thanks for joining us.